This is a quick tutorial on some basic drafting techniques for AutoCAD. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is essentially drafting methodology, how to approach drafting, drafting layers, and we're going to look at blocks and then just draft a few different lines just as an example, as a demo, and use a few of the CAD commands. So real quick, you'll notice just by looking at my drawing setup, or what we would call a workspace in computer tech language, is that I have just a command bar at the bottom, and I have a default. This is a model space. This allows me to switch between model and paper space. Most of these things we won't use, but that's again another default setting. So command bar, a model space toolbar, we have a properties inspector, and we have a layers inspector or a layers window. So if we close those, if I close layers and close properties, I can always just type in layer. That will bring up the layers panel. If I type in properties, it will bring up the properties. In this case, I just personally like to switch them, so that's okay. You can switch them. In this case, I may actually have to pull the properties down. You can just go ahead and switch them. So anyway, arrange them however you like. I've got layers, properties, my command bar. So you notice I've turned off all my toolbars. So go ahead and for this demonstration, turn off all your toolbars. So we don't see any icons. We're going to be drafting with just using commands. So that's what the command line represents down here. This will actually walk us through all the things we want to do today. So on the screen right here, I have 3 levels just really simply drafted, a little diagram that represents how we approach drafting in AutoCAD, just like the real world. What we have is what we call a ground plane, so everything that's going to be on the ground. So this is going to be your sidewalks, your score lines, your DG pathways, it could be your planting areas, stones, steppers, just anything that you would think of as what we would consider 0 level. And then from there what we'll do is build up on top of it. So things that might sit above the ground would be what I'd call this midplane. So when we think about drafting, sometimes we'll draft lines that actually on top of other lines. So that's the nice thing about AutoCAD, is we're actually going to have layers upon layers upon layers. So it's nice to be organized up front. We have this middle plane that represents something that might sit above the ground plane. So think about it like having a retaining wall or a seat wall that could sit actually on the dirt, or it could sit on a concrete. So you might have a plaza layer, and then above that you would have the seat wall layer. Same thing with furnishings. So something like a bench or a chair, if you were to have tables and chairs, or umbrellas. So it would be something that would again sit above the ground plane. And then this top plane, this top line represents things that are overhead. So this is something that would be, could be solid or it could be transparent. So you might think about a fabric canopy structure. This could be a roof overhang, like a cantilever of the roof. So what you would do is you would want to represent that in line work, but then we would see underneath it. You'd be able to see through it. So there is stuff going on underneath this canopy layer. So trees also is a good example. So in this case, you could have a tree underneath it. You could have a bench, and then of course that sits on top of the ground. So you can see how these three, when you're looking down at it in plan view, will overlap each other. So just a quick little example here. If we just had a little sidewalk, and then we had a little bench that sits above the side, that sits on the sidewalk. And then if we had a tree, maybe that's right behind the bench, but the canopy of the tree actually hangs over the sidewalk. So what we're going to have is you're going to start to build these layers up based on this kind of concept. So with that said, I want to just look at some of the layers that I've set up real quick, and I want to toggle some of them on and off. I have my image layer turned off. If I click it, you can see it turns on and off. Right now I'll just leave it off so I can look at some of the other layers. So I have a layer representing my buildings. I have a layer representing center lines. I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. So if I turn that off, I have my image. I've already turned off parcels. I've left off for this example. It came in from QGIS. My paving layer right now really just represents my hardscape. So most of my ground plane layers are all just on one layer. I could break that up into separate layers if I wanted to, and I probably will. But for right now, I have it on one layer. I have my parking stall. This would be my striping. This is again something that comes into the parking in the parking lot. We've got trees. I have a viewport. Don't worry about that one right now. This is something that we'll see in paper space. So it actually doesn't show up in our drawing. At this point, we have L walls, of L water line. So the water line is again indicating where the tide, kind of an average tide level. It gives me an idea of where the sand or the shore starts. I'm going to go ahead and turn all those layers back on except for the ones we're not using. And again, turning the image layer off, you can see what I'm left with if I turn the parcels off too. So you also notice that they're all labeled with L, and this is because this is a landscape architectural demo. If it was an architectural demo, if we were doing floor planning or footprinting, we would be putting A in front of it if we are architects. We are landscape designers, so we're going to use the L designation. Right now I want to look at, let's look at go ahead and creating blocks first. So I want to go and look at, in this case I've got a couple different blocks. You'll notice I have the striping as a block. So this is kind of helpful because if I know these stalls are all uniform. So if I wanted to go in and change this and say I wanted that to be a thin line, so I'll match properties by typing MA. Or if it doesn't let me, then I will just go in and change my global width down here from 4 inches to 0 inches. And I can offset that. If I want that striping stall to be 6 inches wide, I can offset it 3 inches on either side. It's a little hard to see my cursor here. So, and then again, if I just erase that, and I can close that line. So if I save this and close it, you'll notice now the block has changed. So the nice thing about doing that using your stall as a block is that if you did it to one, it'll do it to all of them. In this case, I have an outline now instead of a thick line. So just kind of an example why that might be useful. Again, I've done the same thing over here. These are all blocks. So if I wanted to change that, it would change it for all of them, which saves me some time because I know that these are all, except for a few of them where the median is, where they might be different, I know the majority of these are going to be the same size. So looking at the tree blocks, now I've already got a tree block, but let's say I want to create a new tree block. What I'm going to do is go in, and I'm on the 0 layer, and that's okay for right now. I say don't draft on the 0 layer, but if you're going to create a block, then that's going to be the exception. And I'll show you why. In this case, I've got an X as the one tree, so I want to differentiate the symbol. So I'm going to put a circle. Right now I'm not too worried about size. I can scale it. So I've just drawn 2 circles. Size, not relevant. If you do need to make it a certain size, you can draw a circle. I'll change it. Let's just say I want to make sure that I want the tree to be 30 feet in diameter. So I will actually say C enter for circle, and I will say 15 feet, and that's because the radius is 15 feet. I know I want a 30-foot canopy, so I'll say 15 feet, and there you go. So now I have a 30-foot wide tree. So the circle again for the trunk, its size does not matter. Just go ahead and put a circle in. Something that looks right, something that's not too big, otherwise it looks bulky and odd. I have my lines now, I'm ready to create a block, so I can type in the word block, and it brings up the block editor. I'm going to give it a name. I think I already have an L tree 1. This is a different one, so I'm going to call it just tree 02. So I already have a tree 01. So if you wanted to call it tree pine, or if you wanted to call it tree flowering, or tree accent, or tree something, we can go ahead and give it a designation. In this case, I really don't know the difference between the trees I'm using. I just know that I have 2 different trees. I'm going to go ahead and use tree 02. It says no objects selected. It means I haven't told it what I want to become a block. I'm going to select my objects now by clicking Select Objects. Make sure I get both of those objects. It's going to ask me, where would you want your base point to be? The base point is like the origin of the block. So if I were to copy it or stretch it or scale it, it would scale from that point. So I would want, for a tree, it makes sense to have in the middle. I'm going to press click point and click right there. You can see I have my snap on, so it's trying to snap to the middle. That's good, it helps me. And then that's it. So everything else is okay. I'm just going to hit create block. Now it's going to say that I've already got that defined because I've already done this. In this case, what I want to do is I want to redefine the block. If you already have a block and you deleted it, it still remembers it's there. I'm going to say redefine it. And there we go. You'll notice the block is on the 0 layer. Now the inside of the block, if I open it up, is on the 0 layer. That's good. I actually want the inside of the block to be on the 0 layer. But now I actually have to tell which layer the block, the tree itself, is going to be on. So I have a tree layer. I do not want it to be on the 0 layer anymore. I'm going to switch it. So over in my properties window over here, I'm going to click not color but layer. Underneath color, I'm going to switch down to, I'm going to pick the one I want, which is the tree layer, and I'm going to let go. I'm just going to go ahead and click it once. So you can see the color changed from white to green, and that's good. So the reason why, real quick, that you want the tree inside of the block to be on the 0 layer is because whatever layer you assign it to, it's going to pick up those properties. So that color, and it'll be on that layer, and you'll be able to toggle it on and off. So if I hit close here, you'll notice that now if I turn my trees off, even though I drew it on the 0 layer, because the block itself is on the tree layer, it will disappear. So it's kind of confusing, but if I accidentally, just for some reason, let's just say I drew this and I wasn't paying attention to what layer it was on, and I drew this on my paving layer, you'll notice it turned red, which is the same as my paving layer, and I hit close, and I hit save. I want to hit save. You'll notice now that even though when I select it, it says it's on the tree layer, but it's not green. So it's actually because it's being overridden by the layer on the inside. The only layer that won't be overridden by the block layer is if it's on 0, because 0 doesn't have any property information. It's considered a neutral or a default layer. So now this is kind of, now if I turn the tree off, you'll notice that even though I select it, it tells me it's on the tree layer, but I turn the trees off, it's still on. It's still on because I didn't turn the paving layer off. So same thing, if I do that in reverse, if I had all my trees on, and I wanted to freeze my paving for some reason, you'll notice that I'll lose all the trees that are on that paving layer. So this is really important because even if you draw the inside, even if this is on the tree layer, and you wanted to switch it from one layer to the other, say L tree deciduous, or L tree coniferous, or L tree maybe a frozen layer, proposed or existing, if you wanted to switch that, then all of a sudden the inside of the tree block is still on the old layer, which is why we always draw what's inside the block on a 0 layer. Now, of course, like every rule, there are exceptions, but for the most part, you'll want to do that. You'll notice that we're back now. We can toggle our trees on and off. We can toggle our paving on and off, and it's no longer a problem. In this case, if I had 2 types of trees, you'll notice that I have got these 2 different types of trees. Now if I deleted this tree on accident, if I deleted all my tree 2s that I just created, and I say, oh, I lost all my tree 2s, so I can always just type in insert. Anytime you have a block in the drawing, you'll notice I have a man block. It will show up all the blocks that have been brought in or created in the drawing. So I have my parking stalls 1 and 2, I have my trees 1 and 2. So if you ever delete one, you can always type in insert, and it inserts a block. In this case, I want to go back and insert my tree 2, and because 0 layer is my active layer, it put it on 0 layer. I can switch that from 0 back to tree again, or if I wanted to, I can make tree my active layer. So I'm going to right-click tree, make it my active layer. So now when I insert any blocks, it will come in on the tree layer. So I can go ahead and place that wherever I want. So that's a quick little demo for blocks and why it's important, and of course allowing you to edit. I was able to change all these parking stalls and all the trees instantly just by editing one block, because I know that I've got multiple instances in my drawing. So I want to look at one more thing right here. Like if I'm going to draw these parking stalls and I want to lay them out, like in this case I want to do some drafting in this area, you'll notice that everything in this area is tilted, or it's just not oriented to north. North is up in this case in our drawing. So north is straight up and down, but everything right here is actually not facing north. So one thing I want to do is when I'm drafting these, I may have a hard time getting things to snap, or I might find myself tilting my head. One thing I can do is a couple things, is I can type in the word UCS. UCS stands for, it has to do with the coordinates, and it also has to do with our crosshairs. So our crosshairs right now are oriented up and down, so the same as the grid you see in the background, which would be, call it north-south. So in this case what I want to do is, you'll notice down here it says my UCS name is set to world. So world means by default, the way we set our drawing up is north is up, and you'll notice X is just like think of it like a math grid. X is across, Y is up, just like a math plane for plotting coordinates on a chart. So in this case, I just typed in, I'll do it again, I'm going to type in UCS. It's going to ask me a bunch of options. I can do a face, a name. I want to do OB for object. So I'm going to type in OB. So just type it right in, hit enter, or return. Now you'll see that if you do it, there's a couple different ways. If you align it this way, it will be on the back side of the object. So you'll notice, look at the way the X and the Y is. So all of a sudden you'll be drawing when you were actually rotating our UCS, and we're rotating it to align with this, call it tilted or crooked object. And I'll tell you why we're going to do that in a second. So now we can put our Y actually faces kind of down to the southeast, or we can go the opposite, and our Y actually faces the northwest. So it just depends on what your preference is, because whether you want to draw with this being up or this being up over here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick the left side of the line. So I want to make sure that I have my Y kind of facing to the northwest. And again, this is just a preference. You'll notice what happened there is my crosshairs shifted and my grid shifted. So they both switched in order to align now with this object. That was my UCS OB for object, and it was to align with this object. This is really important because when we turn on ortho, which is if I type in ortho, it asks me down here on or off. There's a shortcut for Macintosh, which is Command L, which just toggles it on automatically, or Command L turns it off. For a PC, it would be F8. I don't have F8, I don't have the F keys on mine, so I have to do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command L. Now that toggles my ortho on. What ortho does is you'll notice is that it locks the drawing to a fixed, it's locked, so I can't actually draw a crooked line. I'm locked now to this new angle. So that's actually really nice because I want to draw all this stuff. In this case, I'm drawing all this dock, and I'm drawing all these walls and all these parking stalls, and everything wants to hit at this particular angle. Of course, we chose to align to the parking lot, and we may want to decide whether or not we're aligning to the dock or to the parking lot. So in this case, I've aligned it to the parking lot. So then if we were to draw, now you'll notice that everything snaps to that angle. So we can continue to draw, we can lay out parking stalls, and we can offset. We can do an O, offset, and then if I were to offset something, say 9 feet, like a parking stall, and all of a sudden it will do that. Now if you're tilting your head because the view is tilted, I've changed my crosshairs, which is the UCS, but what we want to do is now we actually want to rotate the entire drawing. We don't physically want to rotate the objects, we just want to rotate the view. So now I can tilt it so that when I'm drawing something tilted, I can actually rotate the whole drawing so that I'm not turning my head every single time and getting a sore neck. I can type in underscore and the word plan. Now the newer versions can probably just type in the word plan. The underscore was kind of an old school way to do it, so I think I'm going to go ahead and try typing in plan without the underscore and see if that still works. What it's going to do is it's going to ask me, would you like to rotate to the world, which we're actually currently looking north up right now, so we don't want to rotate to the world. We want to rotate what's called current, which is our current UCS. So we just rotated our UCS, which is our cursor. We've rotated our grid, so we want to actually now rotate the way that the view is set up so that it aligns with, or it is now oriented to this new cursor, the new UCS. So you'll see down here, down at your little command line, it prompts you, it says current. Now by default it asks you current, and I want to say yes, so all I have to do is hit enter for current. And you'll notice everything rotated. Now it didn't actually rotate the drawing, which is nice, it just rotated the way it looks. So if I started drawing these things, like let's say I was, turn my image on, and for right now I'll just go ahead and, I'm just going to delete this, I already have it. But if I wanted to then draft it, I can just go ahead and draw, and you'll notice that it snaps exactly now to this dock. Now we have to make a decision here, is that obviously, it's not perfect, so we have to decide whether we want to believe the aerial and continue to rotate, or if we want to just keep that straight for this purpose. For this purpose, I think it's more important that even if the aerial is slightly off, if we have a slight tilt, that what we want to do is keep everything oriented. It's important that the way this would be built in real life is that this would be straight, this would be a 90-degree corner, this would be a 90-degree corner. So when we draft, we want to make sure that even if it's just a teeny tiny bit off, we want to just go ahead and keep that line straight. So same thing goes for down here. We can go ahead and draft that line. We can come up, we've got a little bit of a bulb out, and we can come back. I'm not really sure what's going on, whether that's a hard surface or not, so I may just kind of assume that that's a boat and pull that in. You notice we've got a couple different levels. We've got kind of an upper level and a lower level, so I may want to reflect that in my drawing again. I'm just going to ignore that curve. I'm just going to ignore the fact that that curves. And I'm going to come back, and you'll notice that everything is now snapping because I have my ortho on. It's all snapping to right angles. Now, one thing we want to do also when we're drafting is if we have a line over here and we started to trace, we want to make sure that this line is the same as this line. So we can do a couple different things. We can go ahead and draw a line, and we can then start our new line over there. Or what we can do is, or we can draw another line and then offset it, because we know that we want to essentially do a mirror image of this. So if we checked to see how far apart those were, and I've got that at 12 feet. We want to try and keep everything, of course, when you're drafting to regular dimensions as much as you can. Now you may trace this and it might be 11 feet 3 inches and 3 2/4 inches or something, some decimal point or something like that. But in this case, if we know that it's close to 12 feet, I can just type in DI for dimension, and I can just go ahead and grab the dimension, and right there it tells me it's really 11 feet 9 inches. I may decide in this case just to round it up and say I'm just going to round it to 12 feet. So if I had a line here, I can type in O for offset, and it asks me down here the distance. What's the distance? I want 12 feet. And I can click on the line I just drew, and you can see that it's telling me which direction do you want to go, left, or do you want to go right? I want to go right. And then now I know, because I've offset this, I know that this edge and this edge are all equal. So this is the same distance, this is all hitting at the same point. So when I draw my new line, I want to make sure that, again, that I'm not just arbitrarily drafting, I'm thinking as I'm drafting how it might work in the real world. Of course, what I've just done is corrected this, though. Now that this one I'd drawn originally was too high, I brought that down a little bit lower. We've got a couple different options. In this case, what I want to do is just type in the TR for trim, and I want to trim both these two corners. This one, so TR trim, enter, or return, and I want to trim both of those corners, and now I'm left with a straight line. So that can be erased. You can hit delete or just E, enter for erase, and now we've got rid of that one. So if we turned our image off, you'll see that we're left with something that looks really nice and straight and clean and relatively equal. Same thing applies here. I drew this really quick. So another way to do that is if you didn't want to trim it, you could just draw a line straight down and say, oh, I drew this really quick. In real life, that should probably be aligned. It's not. So in this case, what I can do is I can actually select those lines, and you'll notice the little blue grips come up. Those are the hot grips. What we're going to do is hold down Shift, select each of the grips until they turn red, and then let go of Shift, and then click the hot grip, and you know it's allowing you to stretch it. So now I can stretch this line to any direction I want. I want to stretch it until it snaps. You'll notice that little yellow kind of L shape comes up. That means it's perpendicular, so I want to snap it so that it's perpendicular so it snaps. Just right in place. So again, if I deleted that line, it was only used for reference. I know that this and this would be aligned. So that's, again, good drafting technique. One thing I realized is that I was not paying attention. I drafted on my tree layer, and that's okay, it's not a big deal, but we want to make sure that when we're done drafting that we get it to the right layer. So if we're switching between different layers and we're drafting different things, we want to make sure that we're drafting on the same layer, so on the proper layers. So if you don't do it, if you don't make the right layer your active layer before you draft, you have to go back and do an extra step, which is to match properties. So in this case, I want to match the properties of the paving. So I can type in MA, and right there it says match prop, and then it's asked me to select my source object. That's going to be the paving layer. And then once I've done that, it selects, and then a little paintbrush comes up and it says select your destination object. So my destination object is this dock that I just drew. So you can do that a couple different ways. You can select it a line at a time, but obviously that would take a little while. So a really quick way to do that would be just to click off of the lines and drag it so that you're selecting everything at once. So everything that I just drew on the tree layer, I'm selecting, and it's now turning red. It's now on what I'm calling the paving layer. Of course, that could be on its own layer, it could be on a dock layer if you wanted it to be. So that was match properties, that was ortho. We did the UCS, we did the underscore plan, which is rotating the view to align with the UCS, and we drew some lines, we trimmed, we offset, and then of course we stretched using the hot grips. So there was a few different commands that we did just to draw this little piece here. So I'm going to go back, I want to rotate real quick, so I'm going to type in, I want to type in UCS, and it's going to ask me all these options, and of course I want to go back to where we started, which is world, that was the default, so I'm going to type in W for world, or just hit enter, because world is already showing, it's already saying world, so hit enter. Notice my crosshairs rotated again, it went back to north up, and then again I'm just going to type in the word plan again. It's going to ask me, what do you want? Do you want world or do you want current? Well, in this case, I know that my current is world, so I can just go ahead and hit current. Or if it was not, if your current was not set to world, then you would maybe want to type in world. In this case, I just hit enter. And we're back to square, we're back to up and down. Because we've got a tilted site plan, so I think it's important to be able to go back and forth. So one thing, looking at this parking lot, now unfortunately landscape architects do a lot of parking layouts, which is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's important to get right. So it's important to understand actually how wide lanes and parking stalls are in order to be able to do this correctly. So that's what these center lines are for. So the center lines are representing the center of the drive aisle, so where the cars would be driving. And from there what we would do is offset. So in this case I'll just do a little double check and I'll see, I'm going to type in my dimension. So now this can be a little bit narrower because this is a one-way. So a typical drive lane, from if this was a two-way, this would not be enough space. It's 8 foot 6 inches. What we would need is 12 feet per lane. So from here to here would be 24 foot. That's only if it was 90-degree parking. In this case it's angled. So what we can do is double check and we can see that we're at 17 feet. So if we know we're at 17 feet, you can always offset. If you draw a center line at the center of your parking stall, and you know what I'm going to do for this example? I'm going to turn off what I've already done, and I will just turn my image on, and we'll just leave the trees on. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to call this L demo, just because it's temporary, and I'll make that cyan so it stands out from some of the other layers. Cyan, and I'm going to make that my current layer. So I'll make active or set current. So one thing we do is we want to start by making sure my ortho is turned off, Command L. I'm going to hit L, enter for line, and I'm going to draw a line between this parking stall and what I think of is the end of this parking stall. So somewhere between here and here. And again, I'm trying to make it, and then I'm going to draw a line between the end of, say, this parking stall. And if you went straight across, you would find that this line would be right about here. Again, we're just kind of getting as close as we can. So one thing that gives us is it gives us a center line. So right now I know that that would be the center line of this drive aisle. So then I can type in DI for dimension, and I can dimension from the edge of that striping to my center line. And it tells me that that is 8 foot 11 and 11/16, so that's essentially 9 feet. I can double check the opposite side and see if I get 9 feet on the opposite side. And again, I get 9 feet 5/8 inches. And I'm just going to round to the nearest foot in this case, or round to the nearest 6 inches to make our lives easy. So in this case, now I might have drawn that last one at 17 feet, but after doing this demo for you, you can see that it's actually 9 feet on both sides. So if we typed in O for offset, it's going to ask us how big do we want it. It remembers that the last one we did was 12 feet. We're going to type in 9 feet. So 9 feet, enter. It's going to ask us to select the object that you want to offset. So I know I want to offset it in this direction, and I know I want to offset it in this direction. So we know that's an 18-foot wide drive aisle, and that gives enough room for the cars to back up and for the cars to go through and not hit each other. And the reason why we do it off the center line is so that we know we're at exactly 9 feet on both sides. So that if something got shifted, we can always go back to the center line, and we can always move the center line and then offset from the center line. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to figure out how deep the parking lot is in this case. So I want to know how deep my stalls are going to be. So what I can do is I can click to the end of the stall, which is essentially the middle point between the two stalls. I could pick this end or I could pick this end. I'm going to pick the further away end here. I'm going to come down and it's going to give me 20 foot 6 inches. And I want to do it again on the opposite side, and I want to see, in this case, it's actually going to be quite a bit different because they're coming into a median or a planted median. So here they're coming into striping, so they get the full stall. Here they're coming in at an angled median, so it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to get two different offsets. In this case, I hit right there, the edge of the curb. I'm hitting DI for dimension or for distance, and it says 15 feet. So the first one was 20 feet, and now I have 15 feet. O, enter, 15 feet. This gives me the edge of this median, and I've hit O, enter, 20 feet. O, enter, 20 feet, enter. And it gives me this edge right here between the parking stall. So again, if I wanted to, I'm going to double check. I want to split the distance, so that's 16.6. I'm going to check another one just to kind of do the average between the two. Again, 16.6. So, enter 16 foot 6 inches. So this would essentially, if there was a median, you would see that that's the median. So now what we've got here is we know that this is the overlap. Essentially, this is where the two cars come together. So we know this is the end of one stall, this is the end of another stall. And we know that these are set distances. These are fixed distances that are real. So we're not just eyeballing it. And if we were to continue on with our offsets, we can see we can hit DI for dimension, and we can check from here to here. We know that that's 5 feet. Now that sounds about right for a planter. In order to get something to grow, you need at least 5 feet. You have 6 inches for curb, and then that leaves 4 feet for 6 inches on either side. That leaves 4 feet for planting in the middle, so we can hit O, enter, 5 feet. Again, we're just offsetting. So if we wanted to draw our parking lot, we know now we have a 5 foot median. And again, it's not perfect, that's okay. It's not going to be perfect, it's going to be pretty close, and that's going to be good enough for us. If we continue to offset, if we know what this distance is, if it's the same as the last one we did, it would be 15 feet. We're going to double check it, and we're going to go with 15 feet. And we can just go ahead and offset. This tells us where the end of this lane is going to be. Again, it's close, it's okay. And then we know that this is 18 feet, so that would be 9 and 9 to get to the center line. O, enter, 9 feet, enter. Click, that should give us the center of the street. And it's, again, within a few inches, it's giving us the edge of these stalls. So right now, we're starting to see the parking lot layout. If I turn my image layer off, you'd be able to see that this is essentially the pattern that's starting to emerge. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my image back on. We can continue to do that and continue to offset. In this case, we know that that one was plus or minus 16 feet. We know that the other one was plus or minus 20 feet. So we can come back here to 20 feet. And we know the same thing was, this should be 16 feet. And it is. So the last one we have is this last drive aisle, which takes us all the way to our plaza edge, and that puts us at 24 feet, which makes sense because you have to allow room for a car to park, to drop off, and then you need 12 feet again for the car to be able to clear it. So 24 feet makes sense. Offset 12 feet. So we have a center line and offset 12 feet, and now we have our edge. So you notice everything is hitting exactly where it should be in the real world. Now, we're tracing something that's already been built, but if you were tracing a design, you'd want to do the same thing. You would want to draw it in real dimensions so that it can be built in real life. Just the way that a contractor, you would want to tell the contractor how to build it. And so I'm not going to lay out all these stalls. In this case, what you can do is you can do the block method. You can go ahead and once you've drawn one stall, if you do it as a block, you can do it that way. You can trim. In this case, I would keep it simple. I would just maybe represent each stall as a single line as opposed to the double line. Maybe save yourself some time. And practice doing one of these bays first before you go and do all of them, just to give yourself an idea of how to do that. So that looked at offsetting to distances. So using the distance command to know how far away something is. drawing a line and then offsetting it, telling us, and what that does is it gives us a real-world dimension that then we can go ahead and continue to refine. So one thing I may want to do is I may have drawn a line that's too short. I can always hit EX for extend. I can select an object that I know I want to extend it to and hit enter. And what it did is it extended. So in this case, if I have a line that's too short, I can hit EX, enter, find an object, hit enter, and what it'll do is it'll extend to that line. And then again, if I know I have one line already drawn, I can always figure out what the distance is between the plaza and the building edge. And I can go offset 12 feet, and then I can trim. Those lines, I can BR, I can break a line, and then I can MA, so if I wanted to match the properties. So MA, match the properties, now I've got that. So I was able just to get that corner just by offsetting the building. Now if you don't have the building, again, you just go ahead and draw it. But if you have a line that's already there, go ahead and use it by offsetting. It's really important. So let's we looked at blocks, we looked at offsetting, distance, trimming, extending, quite a few different commands here. So I think that should give a pretty good overview with drafting. We want to make sure again that we're drafting by layer. So if we have something that's on the wrong layer, we can either match properties or we can select the object and we can go into the layers panel and we can put it on the right layer. And if we need to rotate, if we're drawing a bunch of stuff at an angle, we can also rotate the UCS to be able to do that. And again, if you're drafting real quick, if you've got something that's a bit more organic, like you've got these paths or something like that, we can go ahead and we can do a polyline. So in this case, if I wanted to draw the center line, I can draw the center line of what I consider some natural paths in a bridge here. So real quick, just to draft some more stuff, you can click down on the center line, click here. I want to just do A for arc. It's a polyline, so I can actually combine the arcs and the lines into one. And then what I want to do is I'll carry this over to the bridge. So I'll pull this arc into the center, and then I'm going to redo that. I didn't like where I hit it. Instead of hitting escape and starting over, I can hit U enter. So that just allows me to redo it. And then I have to go back and hit A enter again. That gives me my arc. So what I want to do is pull the arc around a little bit more. Because I wanted this nice graceful arc here. And then in this case I want to click down, I want to hit L for line, I want to go back to a straight line, I know that's a straight line. I want to hit here, I want to hit A for arc again, and then that's going to give me the finishing arc for that path. Now what I want to do is, in this case I know I have another path coming into this area, so I want to hit PL for P line. In this case I'm going to take my path, connect here just to get it started, hit A for arc. I know that I've got this arc, you can see the radius of this planting edge, and the arc kind of does a couple different things. It looks like it comes in pretty straight here, but then it opens up wider. So we have a few different options. In this case what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and pull it in as if it came in and took that turn. So we can do a couple different things. So I've got a couple different polylines representing a few different path channels, and again we can go ahead and hit O once I figure out how wide I want my path to be. And this looks like it's going to be close to 12 feet. Excuse me, it would be 12 foot total, so my offset would be 6 feet on either side. Same thing, I'll just go ahead and go with 6 feet for that path there. And of course, what I can do then is, if I have this little area that I've missed, I can go ahead and adjust. I can adjust some of these layers. So we can hit the trim command. We can trim up some of these things, and you'll notice now that we actually really should have another arc coming in here. Well, we can try fixing that. We can try giving that a curve if we want with the fillet command. So we can go in and say F for fillet. We can tell what radius we want. The radius, in this case, we'll just throw out a number, just say 6 feet. Same as our path. We'll click here. Excuse me, don't do it. Don't select it first. So this would be fillet, F fillet. And then it would be, we're going to go in and do radius, 6 feet. It's going to ask us what objects we want to fillet. So we've just filleted that. So what we've done is we've created a nice little center line. Obviously I haven't gone all the way to the edge, I'm just doing this as an example. If you had a path with a curved edge, we can actually make a curved edge. Same thing here, you'll notice that they don't hit exactly tangent, and that was because I was just eyeballing it when I did that curve. We can always explode a P-line, so hitting X, we can explode a line. And I can look at this curve and I say, I like the curve, but it's just not hitting tangent. So what I can do is I can look at that curve, I can scroll down to my properties. It gives me a radius of 17 feet 7 inches. Now again, I'm going to want to use a round number, so I'm going to try and round that up to maybe 18 feet. So if I deleted that line, I can hit, or I'm going to see if I can get these, I'm going to see if I can fillet this. Now some objects it won't let me, so we're going to go ahead and try it. Fillet, enter, radius, enter, 18 feet. I want to see if I can get this object to fillet with this object. And you can see that if it's letting you, if it's going to let you, it'll show a little white line of showing you what it looks like. Now I just did that 18 feet and it actually pulled it in way too tight. So I want to go the opposite. Instead of doing 18-foot radius, I'm going to go fillet, enter, radius, enter, 17 foot 6 inches. So I want to round it just down to the nearest inch, down to the nearest 6 inches. And this should give me a much better arc. There we go. And you can see what it did is it actually, in order to do that, it actually pulled my line. And again, I can either re-offset from that middle, or I can just stretch. The line back to what I think is the start of that path. So now I know that this edge and this edge now I've joined together into one polyline and they're tangent, which is kind of nice. Again, if I did it with the center line, then I can offset. So in this case, for right now, I'll just delete the center lines. Now I know that I did this one at 6 feet. If I wanted to open that up even more and do something much larger and more graceful, I can go fillet, enter, radius, enter, 10 feet, and see what 10 feet looks like. I can always change it just because I filleted it one time. So fillet, enter, radius, 10 foot. Now sometimes it won't let you do two curves, so sometimes you have to go back to, sometimes you have to explode it first. So if you're having problems with a radius, try exploding and seeing if you can do it as just individual lines instead of a polyline. In this case, fillet, enter, radius, enter, 10 foot, enter. And you can see there, now it was able to do that one. So there's the fillet command. I've got some nice graceful paths. In this case, I would want to continue that. I would want to do the opposite. Instead of drawing the path, I actually really want to draw the planting area. So I would draw the edge of the planting area and I'd fillet those curves and I'd give those some nice graceful curves. I would fillet this corner and I'd come back in again, and this would all be just maybe one big planting area. And we would want to, draw a line that represents the edge of this pathway. So somewhere in here there would be some sort of definitive edge line to represent the stop of the DG. So some quick tips in AutoCAD for drafting. It's going to make your drafting not only more accurate, but go quicker and look much better for the next stages, which is, of course, refining the drafting so that we can get to something that we can print. So thank you very much.